Today is the 20th of June 2011, and we're joined today by the creator of Kymatica and Esoteric Agenda, also the lead singer of Hero Sonic, Ben Stewart. How are you doing today, Ben?
Not too bad. Very happy to be on this show now.
Wonderful. Ben's feeling a little bit under the weather. I think he caught my cold. But so we're going to go easy on him today with the questions and stuff and just keep it really relaxed. Usually is here anyway, just very relaxed and casual. And first of all, Ben's just gotten back from a tour where he was staying with Max Egan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was Max Egan plus quite a few other people from Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. Got to do quite a few talks, so it was quite an interesting trip.
Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Well, yeah, basically, I went out there. It was, I think, the first talk was in Brisbane in Melbourne on May 27th, and each and every one of these talks that I gave, basically, I decided that it wasn't sufficient just to stand up there and talk and to give slides and and basically show those images and show quotes and things like that. I really wanted to stress the fact that the real moment that was happening right there. There's human beings in a room together. So basically, what we did was a few different things with eye contact. One is called the Sufi Heart Dance, which went over really well, even though people were a little uneasy about it at first because they weren't expecting anything like that, but that's kind of the point. You're supposed to kind of feel a little uneasy about it. And I had everyone pick a stranger in the room and basically just lock eyes with them, make eye contact with them for about a minute completely silently in the room. And within a minute, there were people completely, some of them were laughing, some of them were on their knees crying. It was just really, really intense and really amazing, simply for the fact that most people don't make eye contact anymore, and that was really what a lot of the talks were about. I spoke a lot about the occult properties of eyes, but I wanted to show that there is something extremely truthful and extremely telling in the eyes. So that's pretty much where, that's just a taste of what some of the talks were. Obviously, I got into quite a few other things, and also the inevitable age of art, which is research that I've been doing for the past year or so. And so we did two talks in Melbourne, one in Sydney. We actually canceled the one in Brisbane, but then we went up to Byron Bay and did a talk in Byron Bay, and it was incredible getting to stay with Max again, come into contact with a lot of people that I met last September when I was out there.
Fantastic. That's great. I've been to Australia myself. It's a fantastic energy out there, isn't it?
Oh, it's unreal. It's unlike anywhere else I've really been. South America is probably one of my favorite places to go to, but Australia has a very unique energy to it that's just you can't come close to it anywhere else.
No, definitely. I remember being at Devil's Marbles, which isn't too far off from Ayers, right? And the energy there in the central Australia and then down a bit farther, it's just, it's inspiring. I don't draw. I can just stick people. I try. I like to paint abstract, but I was able to do a really, really amazing picture while we were driving through the desert. And honestly, it just came out of nowhere. And I totally give kudos to the energy that is in the area that I was inspired to do what I did. Now, from what I understand, you were doing a lot of art and doing a lot of hands-on in your seminars. As you said, you wanted to involve people and not just, show them this, that, or the other, but get them to participate more or less, so that they could see with their own eyes and with themselves by doing, instead of just being a participant anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, no, honestly, that was the most important part of all of it, simply because I I've done talks before in the past, obviously. I've done quite a few, and this was the first time I really chose to just really go in unprepared and just assess the moment really for what it is, because there was a lot of incredible stuff happening when we would actually take a break and stop and do some of these. I had people just get up and stretch whenever they wanted to. If they wanted to ask a question right in the middle of the talk, that was fine. I wanted them to understand that this was, human beings in a room with one another. That there shouldn't be any status or class or anything else along those lines. It's really, we're human beings in a room with one another. We should recognize that, because that's a real moment. Everything that's happening up on the on the projector screen, all the slides and everything, that's not real life. That's symbols or squiggly lines that are supposed to represent that real life, but it's not real life. So it was quite interesting. And obviously, there were slides that I stripped all the text out of it because I didn't want people reading. I didn't want them up in their intellect. So I just had images, and I spoke just pretty much off the cuff with the inevitable age of art. Like I said, the research that I've been doing and the cycles of time that lead us into what we're moving into right now, being the inevitable age of art. But as far as the Sufi heart dance, it's something that I found really, really incredible, because everybody that was involved in it, because there were a few that opted not to do it, and I respected that, but almost everybody else who felt really awkward about finding a stranger, putting their right hand on the person's shoulder and their left hand on their heart, and the other person across from them doing the same for them, and we got quiet enough to where we could hear the breath of the person directly across from you. And just staring into the eyes for the first 15-20 seconds, you could tell that the awkwardness, the tension was still there. And a lot of people started laughing, and I told them it was all right. You can laugh; it's completely fine. Just when you come out of it, just go back to being silent again. And that happened once or twice, and then it got really quiet. And so the last time I did it in Byron, I actually let them go as long as they wanted, and I hadn't done that in the previous talks. And they went for, I would say, a good 3-4 minutes, and that's quite long when you're completely silent, staring into somebody's eyes. So afterwards, the energy had completely shifted. Everybody was hugging each other, talking to each other. It took 15 minutes for them to quiet down. And, I didn't tell them to quiet down or anything, because I wanted them to be able to talk with one another, talk with a complete stranger that they just shared that moment with. So it was really incredible, but a lot of the research that I've been doing that led up to this has been pretty much just showing me that this is what people recognize. These are the things that people truly recognize as being those real moments that they can hold on to, that they actually remember. And that's pretty much the most of what all these talks were getting into, was let's try and find a real moment for us to really be a part of.
Yeah. My husband and I actually do the same thing. When we were doing separate meditations a few years back, we were introduced to the Sufi heart dance, and it's something that we value, because we find that when we do it, and you're right, even as a couple, for the first few times that we did it, I mean, we were laughing hysterically, because you're just not used to that. Even as lovers, you're not used to staring eye to eye for that long and just letting everything go. Hand on the heart. It's something that's really incredible. I actually urge all couples to do it. I think everybody should do it at some point. But it is, I could see for strangers how it would be a little bit more, they'd be a little more apprehensive to doing something like that. But what a way to get everybody to let all of their stuff go and just be, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, as you said, there's hardly anybody that truly ever does that, where they really look into one another's eyes. So it's incredible to actually see that happen. And, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Strangers, it's one thing. I actually think it can become a bit more intense with either a close friend or a lover or somebody, because you already have some type of connection with them, some type of contact, some deep conduit. into deeper than their intellect. It's into their emotional, even sometimes into their instinctual centers. So when you're looking at them and you're a little bit more comfortable with the person across from you, you actually let go even more, and it could have many things surface that you wouldn't imagine. And that's, I think that's actually probably a lot more therapeutic to do it with somebody that you are familiar with.
Oh, definitely.
Because obviously we only enter into relationships with people, whether it be friendship or marriage or anything. We only enter into those relationships because those people reflect something. They teach us about ourselves on such a deep level that the intellect can't even touch. So it's really interesting. But as with the talks, it's interesting to allow people to be able to take a stranger or to find a stranger that they'd never met before and kind of enter into that moment with them, because it's kind of interesting. Every single person that had talked to me about it afterwards said that there was something very specific about the person that they had chosen that they didn't realize until well afterwards, but there was something very specific about the person they chose that meant something very, very specific to them. So it was almost like it was meant to happen that way. And it was good to see that people were actually picking up on that, because that's something that I was going to say, but I actually didn't want to say it beforehand. I wanted people to discover that on their own. And almost everybody did discover that the person they chose, there was a reason. Whether they knew it intellectually or not, there was a reason why they chose that person.
Well, because the reality of things is that you don't just meet people randomly for no reason. There's a reason for everything, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what some people call a cause, I believe, is more a correlation in a sense, because I don't believe that we just choose the people that we want to be friends with because intellectually they reflect something about ourselves, or we just like that type of company, because we all know that there are people in our inner circle of friends that still do get to us, and they still do strike nerves very, very close to home. And what's interesting about that is I believe that's more of a correlation than a cause. It's not just the fact that we're friends with them and we have to put up with these things, but it's a correlation to exactly what's going on within us at the time. And that's something that, I'm in a music group with 4 other people, and we've been together for about 8 years now. And when we tour, it's nonstop. We're in a van, cramped up in this small little van for months at a time. So you can imagine, when people get irritable, it comes out.
Oh, for sure.
And when you're comfortable enough with those people to be able to say exactly what you're feeling, it's actually really interesting, because I've noticed, for one, that I just hold the space more than anything. I don't really enter into any of the arguments or hop into any too much of the debate. I really just kind of hold the space between people, because even if there's something quite quite brutal going on as far as like arguing between some of the band members, it's still, to me, it's perfect. It's exactly what needs to happen at that moment. So I used to be the type that would try and keep the peace and try and settle things down, but that's not even what I do anymore, because a lot of what's happening is very important. And I say this all the time, but one of my favorite lines is, "This too shall pass." And what's interesting about that is we see that all the time. What we see is tempers flaring. We see this on global levels too. We see that hours before the first plane struck the 9/11 on 9/11, hours right before the plane struck the World Trade Center, there was a spike in the electromagnetic energy across the world, in the conscious energy, and that was a study done by Dr. Dean Radin. He set up electrodiagrams all around the Earth to kind of measure that energy, that conscious energy within people in major cities. And right before the first plane hit, there was a spike, unseen, like higher than they'd ever seen before.
As if we knew it was coming.
What's that?
As if we knew it was coming.
Yeah, but I believe that partly what that is, again, there's a lot of people that speak about the causes of this and the causes of that. I think most everything is a correlation rather than a cause, because that would explain things so much more on the sense of synchronicity. Because when things happen, it boggles the mind to try and figure out how these things link up as causes. But when you realize that they're all correlations of one thing, and that one thing is consciousness, and that one thing, consciousness, is shared by not just all of humanity, but the entire Earth, actually the entire solar system, and varying densities and levels all the way throughout the entire universe. So what I realize is that everything that's happening needs to play itself out in a certain way. You know, if you were to shut a book at the first moment of there being a struggle or strife or some type of conflict, you would never see it being resolved. And that's kind of getting back to what I was saying in, let's say, if I'm on tour with the guys and there is a big heated debate or you know, a couple people blow up at one another, to me that's exactly what needs to happen at that time, and it needs to play itself out. And the best thing I could do is really just hold that space and just be there, but not really hop in and intervene in any way, because there's really that's another reason why these talks that I gave in Australia had more to do with the interaction between the people there rather than them just watching a slideshow. And the reason for that is really there's not too much I can say. I've realized that I've said everything that I could possibly say about what I believe. And yes, there's more research and there's better understandings and better comprehensions coming in day by day with me as far as what's going on in the world, what's going on within me. However, I end up saying the same things over and over and over again and just finding new ways to bring them up and new ways to say it. And I realized at first I was getting a little worried about that, because there's not much more you can say. You know, in Chimatica, I pretty much said everything I wanted to say there. But there's different ways to say it. There's different ways to attach it to different people's understandings and their comprehension. So let's say in an argument, there's not really much I can say to quell that argument or to calm it down, because I'm not the one involved in it, and nothing I can say is really going to equalize whatever energy those two individuals are having. They need to play it out for themselves. And that was precisely what I started realizing when I went to Australia. As far as on my flight out there, I actually was planning on just doing a typical slideshow presentation, and my plane was struck by lightning on the way out to LA, and it was really, really wild, incredible experience. But what that basically led to was me just deciding that I wanted to just do something off the cuff and do something completely in the moment when I got there, because I decided that when the plane was struck by lightning as I was flying over Texas and the lights went out and we dropped 200 feet out of the sky, it was an incredible moment. As exhilarating and kind of scary as it was an incredible moment, and that's a moment that not too many people get to experience. And yeah, it scared the hell out of me.
For sure.
Sense. Well, I will say this. It wasn't the lightning or the plane falling out of the sky that scared the hell out of me. It was the lady behind me that jumped over the seat, dug her nails into my shoulder, and screamed in my ear. That's what kind of startled me. But basically, what's interesting about that is just the fact that when I got to Australia, I had at that point decided, okay, I'm just going to have a real moment, have those real moments with these individuals in Melbourne, Sydney, Byron Bay, and wherever else I was going to. And everything was just in the moment. Everything that I said was really in the moment, and I allowed anybody to say whatever they felt in the moment. And it just turned into something that it wasn't till maybe a few days later, some emails came in even a week later of the people who attended that said it was really something incredible for them, because they were expecting one thing and they got something different. But then in the days to come, as all that energy began unfolding, they started realizing that something incredible had happened, and they weren't even 100% aware at the time of what was happening. So that was really, really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. And something is that we're all trying, well, a lot of us are trying to do, I think, as we're, I want to say waking up or whatever, but is that we are trying to live in the moment, because there's nothing exists that matters past that. Living in the moment and living in now and doing what, if you're worrying about yesterday, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. There's nothing you can do about hours from now even. It's just right now that's what is the thing that counts, that's going to give you any type of pleasure or learning or anything like that, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there really is no future and there really is no past. There's nothing other than right now. If you would say that, oh, tomorrow will come eventually, tomorrow really doesn't ever come. It's always just right now. And the calendar may change, the clock on your computer may change, but there's nothing other than right now. And I think that's one of the most important things that I had to realize with all the research that I've done, all the way through Esoteric Agenda, all the way through Chimatica, with all the individuals that I began researching, a lot of the bloodlines I began researching, and how far back those bloodlines had gone. What was very important for me to recognize is, okay, these are things, yes, they're happening, they've happened, and they will continue to happen, but there's nothing that I can do other than what I can do right now in this moment. And that's extremely important, because I still, and when I was out in Australia, I get these questions a lot, and this is probably one of the most typical questions that I get is, how is it that things are going to change just by looking inward? How is it that the world is going to change just by looking inward? How is it that these wars are going to stop? How is it that famine is going to be taken care of, or poverty is going to be taken care of? How is it that the central bankers are going to basically stop funding both sides of each war? How is it that any of this is going to stop by looking inward? And the only thing that I can really say is try it. Is truly try it, because the most we have in our lives right now is what we have right in front of us. And there's a really incredible individual that I met in Australia, and we were talking quite a bit about co-creation. Now, we are here, and yes, we create our own reality, but we are co-creating with other individuals, and I think that is far more important, because if you're in a room with 5 other individuals, it doesn't matter how advanced you are or you believe you are, or how advanced they are or they believe they are. You're basically working with just a certain group of individuals. You're working with a certain amount of resources in that room. And what can we do with this? What can we do with these things that we have right now? Because there's no such thing as anything other than that, because none of that's in the room right now. We have this, and this is all we have, so what can we do with it? And I've realized that with me, the films that I've done, I absolutely appreciate everything I've done with the films, and I'm glad that I was able to do that. But it's also about building community. It's also about allowing others to recognize how important community is, or how important it is to co-create, to find other individuals that want the same thing. Because this is actually something that's going to be getting into my next film that I'll be releasing, is the next film being Ungrip. But basically in this next film that I did with Robert Paget, one of the most important things or aspects of all of it is the fact that we are nothing more than human beings. Now, if you were to take a step back and you were to maybe hover above the earth and just look at everything that's going on, it's human beings with big buildings, with big guns, with pollution. It's human beings with these ideas, these either completely destructive ideas or very novel ideas. It's human beings doing these things with other human beings. That's all it is. At the end of the day, we all go home and we don't go to sleep. We don't crawl into our bed as a president or as a CEO or as a stockbroker or as a lawyer, a doctor, or a mother, a father, as a philanthropist. We don't go to bed as any of those things. We go to bed as a human being. And I think people forget about that a lot, because what drives everything today. And if you look out in the world, you can see that a lot of things are being driven. Pollution is being driven. Corruption, decay of society is all being driven by something. But what is it being driven by? It's being driven by an idea. That's it. These are all just ideas that people are keeping within them, within their communities, within their societies. It's just human beings, individuals, that are allowing these ideas of government, these ideas of law, these ideas of the economy, these ideas that pretty much shape and mold what we do as a race, as a species. These are nothing more than ideas of human beings. And ideas are the easiest things to change. So when people ask me, how is it that looking inward you can change the world? How is it? It makes absolutely no sense. Well, you're right. It makes absolutely no sense to the intellect, because the intellect only sees causes. As I was saying before, there's no such thing as a correlation. They're all causes, right? Well, I disagree with that, because I believe that everything that we see is a correlation. What we are seeing in the world is an actual reflection of what's going on within us. And basically, that's what the epitome of all my work is, specifically this next film, is we are just human beings driven by ideas. All we have to do is look into those ideas and see whether they truly serve us or not. Because I think that as a species, we're coming from an adolescent species to an adult species. And that's actually something I get into a lot in this film, and I actually show the science behind it. But we as a species are beginning to understand that we have so much power through our ideas, through our consciousness. We have so much ability to create and destroy with our mind that we're actually starting to see that, okay, yes, we can destroy this planet. It seems vast and it seems infinite, but it's not. We can destroy this planet if we want to. So it's up to us. It's a choice. Do we want to keep going down this road because it's too difficult and it's too uncomfortable to radically change what we're doing? Or do we just find something, use our infinite artistic, intuitive, creative abilities within us, which we all have, to co-create something better? And that's the biggest problem I see, is a lot of these people that say that we need to fight this, we need to take up arms, we need a revolution, we need all of these things. To me, all that is doing is creating that energy of wanting to fight. I still hear a lot of people saying that, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. That sounds too much like communism. That sounds too much like fascism. This sounds too much like that. The problem that I see is not the ideas that people are attaching themselves to or rebelling against. It's the fact that most people do not want to attach themselves to certain ideas because of things that they don't even understand. And I think Mark Twain said it the best, is most people's ideas opinions. Most people's opinions are taken from other people's opinions, who are taken from other people's opinions, whose opinions aren't worth anything. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I see a lot, is a lot of the times we will defend opinions that we don't even know how we arrived at those opinions. And we'll defend them like they're our own, like they're our children. But I've seen this happen so many times in a debate or in an argument, where the debate will be driven by an idea of wanting to win or wanting to be the victor of the debate. So it doesn't matter what's being said as long as you come out on top. And I actually think that that's something that exists within all of us, and you'll only recognize that if you look within, because I believe that is one of the biggest chunks of energy that we employ in this world that creates what we're seeing in the world today. All the poverty, all the famine, all the destruction, all the decay, and all the beauty. But to understand what we are doing as human beings, as an entire race, is we are not taking that responsibility upon ourselves anymore. So I absolutely believe action should be taken, and this is the biggest cornerstone of my work. Action is something that is absolutely necessary, and there's some misunderstanding that that my work gets into. Just meditate, just focus on yourself. You don't have to worry about anything else. I don't believe that whatsoever. I believe that we should take a look at what's actually going on. We should understand ourselves and our relation to what's going on in the world, and then we should act. But it's the same in Buddhism. They say the three aspects of all action should be, first, right view, and then right intention, and then right action. So those three right there. First, you need to see the world in the right way. You need to see the world for what it truly is. Secondly, you need to have the right intention, because some people see the world the way it is, but they don't care. They realize how comfortable it is to stay exactly where they're at. And you see a lot of these people as being the ones that they'll do something that they're even morally conflicted about if it causes more convenience in their life, or if it gives them instant gratification in some way, shape, or form. And that's something that I believe is a psychological aggregate within humanity. All we need to do is recognize it for what it's truly doing, because really there is no such thing as temporary gratification being a good thing. Because what all of that means is, when we're only working towards the next 5 minutes of our life and feeling great for the next 5 minutes of our life, well, then we're not actually looking at what's really going on. Because if you were to understand how energy creates and how energy actually transforms itself within the physical organism through the way we eat, through the way we breathe, and the way we think, because those are our three stomachs, really. You know, our food goes into our stomach, our air goes into our lungs, and impressions of the universe come into our mind. Basically, they come into our consciousness. And those are our three stomachs. And we digest all of that food, all of that energy, and we transform it. But do we know how we're transforming that? Many people don't even know how they transform the food within them. Many people don't even know how important breathing is, other than the fact that it just keeps you alive. Because breathing, there's a reason why yoga has so much to do with the breath. And that's definitely an interesting topic to get into. But then the impressions that come in, all the impressions that come into our consciousness, it's actually interesting to note that we can go days without food. We can go minutes without oxygen, but we can't go even a fraction of a second without impressions from our environment. We can't even go one fraction of a second without that, because that is the energy that our body uses to live. Everything else is different densities of keeping different portions of our physical life or our energetic life up to speed. But impressions, we need every single moment. We need impressions. Otherwise, the cells in our body would just stop. The organs would stop, and we would cease to be. So that's one of the most interesting things to look at is, do we even know how we transform our impressions, or how we transform our thoughts, how we're actually transforming that energy? Because that is the energy that actually creates. The food that we eat, it creates our body, yes. The breath, that entrains us in a certain way, and there's many more aspects to that I won't get into now. But the impressions that we take in, every single moment, we are transforming energy. But how are we doing it? That is why I say, don't sit in front of your computer and watching documentaries all day of what's going on with central banking and the Rothschild dynasty and the Rockefellers and the bloodlines that go back into Egypt, because that's all very, very interesting. But when you're done with that, at least take a look around you. You're sitting in a room. You're not in the computer. You're sitting in a room, and it's just you. You're fine. And I see so many people that are, and I got so many emails after Esoteric Agenda, and this is actually what led to me doing Chimatica. I got so many emails from Esoteric Agenda of people saying, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm freaked out. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. And there's individuals that said, after not my film, but after certain other films that are out there, they decided they were going to buy a bunch of guns. There's this 17-year-old individual that decided to scrounge up as much food as he could and run off into the woods, and saying that he was going to wait all of this out. And I specifically said, wait what out exactly? Your life? Because I'm not really sure what you would be waiting out. And that's really, again, that's like the cornerstone of all of my work, is the fact that unless you are truly, truly, truly aware of how you are transforming your energy, you're not going to understand how we can actually change the world with our thoughts, with our ideas. Look at Gandhi, for instance. That all started from an idea, from a thought. And all it was his intention. He had the right view, he had the right perception of the world, he had a good intention, and then he acted. And I think there's those three things, specifically the life of Gandhi, absolutely incredible. If you were to just look at not what he did in India, but what kind of a person he was, what kind of an individual he was. And I don't know, I mean, I think if we were to look deeper into the intentions of individuals, and if we were to actually look deeper into their eyes and not what we read about them, and if we were actually to be able to understand that everybody else in this world is trying to get along as much as they possibly can, then
with the tools that they're given.
With the tools that they're given, because everybody has defects, you know.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I just read something on this blog that Gandhi was a racist and hated blacks. I for one don't know about that. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't believe that anybody right now ever had even met him, or and maybe some of his writings had that. But basically what I'm getting at with this is even those individuals, everybody has certain things about them. Everybody has certain psychological defects or psychological aggregates, and maybe even Gandhi had. But if we were to look at all individuals, and I'm saying every single individual, not even the ones that go down in history as heroes, but some of the ones that go down in history very infamously, if we were to look at that and to look, okay, what does this mean to me? How did this individual learn throughout his life, and what were the actual steps that he or she had taken? And that was what kind of got me into Robert Paget up in Canada, because he declared his sovereignty, if you will, or his special equity or God's equity, or he basically had just removed himself from all other forms of governance and chose only to serve one master, being his creator, and that's the epitome of all of his work.
Okay, so sorry, not to interrupt, but for those that don't know, Robert Paget is a Canadian living in Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's on the west coast of Canada.
Okay.
I'm not going to get into exactly where he lives because he would like to keep that anonymous.
Good for him.
But basically, he, as everybody else, he's had his ups and downs. He's in his life, he's had basically many psychological problems with depression, problems with addiction, and he chose at one point in his life to completely overcome that. And basically what he had done was he started doing some research on what controls him. And that research led him, because obviously he was coming from addictions and things along those lines, even psychological and emotional addictions. He was coming from that, but he decided to look into what controls him, and his research is absolutely incredible. It goes very, very deep into the history of Canada, into the history of the Crown, and into how all law operates and functions today. So basically the path of his life had led him all down one rabbit hole, that was to find what he was governed by. And once he truly recognized what he was governed by, then he could make the decision, okay, I'm going to step back from it. And he took a step back from it, looked at what he was controlled by, and then he decided, okay, I'm gonna sever these ties. So he sent back his passport, his driver's license, everything. He sent it all back to the basically to the local government there.
To the Governor General.
Yeah, and they did not like that one bit. But he sent it back, and he even said in his note, he was like, look, all these things say property of the government, so I'm sending your property back to you, because it's no longer, I no longer am the custodian of these things. And he's been in court, he's been pulled over before driving without driver's license, and each and every time he got through it the best he possibly could. He learned a lot of it was trial and error, because he didn't have somebody standing there with him saying, oh, you're not supposed to say this, you're not supposed to do that. He was doing this all by trial and error, and it was really incredible to see the fact that he had the courage to do that. And,
Definitely.
he stood up in court as a human being and didn't leave until they recognized him as a human being, not a corporation, not a person, not a artificial person. He basically stood there as a human being and would not leave until they recognized that. And it was the same thing when whenever he would be pulled over. So he basically did the very next thing. When you go from when you go from dependency into independence, then the very next step, once you've declared your independence, then it's all about interdependence, and that's kind of what I was talking about before with co-creation. It's not all about creating our lives, because to me that's boring. I already know how I can create my own life. I want to co-create with others. I want to see what can happen on this planet with other individuals. So with Rob, he decided to go from independence into interdependence, which means he wanted to teach. So that's what he's been doing, and that's actually he filmed 8 modules, about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, I believe, of all of his life's research, and it's incredible. I just actually watched it again. I think it was a week ago, and incredible research, some of the most incredible research I've ever seen, and he really, really, really does put it in such an easy, relatable way for anybody to understand. But he goes far beyond law, and he goes far beyond equity. He goes far beyond any of these things, and he goes into the energetic heart of the matter. So he shows that this isn't something that, once you declare your sovereignty or declare that you are just a human being and you only serve your creator, one master, then it's not just peaches and cream from then on. It's still a struggle, because there are so many people who are still locked into this system, and they believe, the police officers that pull him over believe that they're doing what's best. And when they do, when they had pulled him over, he recognized the same thing that I've been recognizing, is really it's nothing more than a human being driven by an idea. And when it's a person driven by an idea, all you have to do is understand that you're not speaking to somebody that is looking at things the same way you are. So really it's about taking a look at that individual in front of you and saying, like, okay, it doesn't matter what I say as far as this, like, I'm a sovereign, I don't need to drive with a driver's license, I don't need these documents, I don't need to testify to you right now. All of that is basically what he noticed goes in one ear and right out the other of a police officer, because they have their duty. They just want to get back in their car. All they want to do is serve you with the ticket. So he did his due diligence. He said exactly what he needed to, but he didn't stress the matter. He didn't argue with the guy. He didn't yell at him. He didn't call him names, nothing. He treated him like an individual, understanding that this individual did not recognize what he was recognizing. And then he decided to take it to letters, so he started a letter campaign, and that eventually landed him in court. And when he went to court, that was when he got to stand there as a man, as a human being, and say, I serve only one master, I was brought here forcibly, I have no idea what language you guys are speaking, but this has absolutely nothing to do with me. This has to do with a piece of paper that I gave back months ago, years ago. And this has absolutely nothing to do with me, and this is a complete waste of my time. And he obviously said it a bit nicer than the way I'm putting it, but he basically stood there as a man and said, this is exactly what I am. I am nothing more than this. I am what this human being standing before you is, all that I am. And the judge could not place anything on him whatsoever, because he was not agreeing to be a corporation. He was not agreeing to be a dead instrument, a corpse, anything along those lines, because that is all a fiction can act upon. And the legal society, all governments, all economy, they're all fictions. Like I said, they're all ideas. They're all fiction. And the only way that they can act upon the man is through another fiction that the man agrees to represent. And that's pretty much what this game is, because that's mostly what all this is it's a certain type of game that we're playing. So it's his research. I can't even do any justice to his research because it's just incredible.
Now, you'd said that you're putting this all into movie format?
Well, yeah, this is going to be in a film called Ungrip. It should be coming out hopefully within the next 2 months.
Fantastic. I know my husband and I, this is something that's really interesting to us because recently, well, not recently, for many years now, I've been studying ancient theories and ancient religions as far as the North American Indian, the Indians of the Americas and whatnot go. And from what I've been able to find out through, I don't know if you've heard of Meredith Quinn or not, but he is an old Indian chief, no longer with us. And he talks about the laws going all the way back to the times of, say, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and even farther back beyond that, to the several migrations that have happened on the earth that humanity's been able to survive through because they've migrated with the earth changes and the ice ages and whatnot. And that there's several treaties that right now in North America, even the crown, from what I understand, the queen has taken over as white race, the white tribes' lands and everything to do with it. And because there is a white tribe, because I was actually listening to an interview where Max had said, I don't understand, Max Egan that is, where the white people come from. We don't really fit in, but we do. It's just been erased from our minds completely that we are any type of indigenous at all whatsoever. Just the thought alone of being an indigenous is so foreign to us because it's been completely, I want to say wiped out from our DNA, but I think our DNA memory is starting to come back with that. You see that there's several white clan mothers that are coming out now and saying, okay, we're taking back our land and we're going to do things this way now. I don't know if you're familiar with any of what I'm talking about, are you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I've had some of these conversations with Max where I don't agree with all of what he says and where his ideas of where the white race came from. It's definitely very interesting as far as going back and being able to look at. I mean, he draws from a lot of research that I've done in the past that I do agree with, but some of the directions that humanity has taken in the past, I believe, could be explained many different ways. So I'm not saying I completely disagree either. I just don't believe that it would be beneficial for me to say, yes, this is what happened just because it makes the most sense right now, because there are quite a few other ways of how things could have actually gone and how humanity could have I guess I would say influence, how we could have been influenced towards the direction to where we're kind of taking right now. Because one thing that I see a lot of is the transformations of energy within the human organism happen in very peculiar ways when peculiar things start happening on the planet. So I believe that, I don't know, a lot of these changes that through the past maybe 15, 20,000 years on this planet has definitely brought us to a point to where now we seem to have forgotten a lot of the philosophy of why we have our technology, a lot of the philosophy of where, I don't just want to say religion, but spirituality has come from. Because I believe that dogma is placed on spirituality so much to the point where it's almost a rat race to even find out what the true spiritual core of many religions are. And even though it can be put intellectually in a very succinct way, I think that it's, again, it's for each individual to kind of figure out. And that's why a lot of my research, at least lately, has definitely gone into the ancient past, but has also brought it right back up to what I feel today. And I actually did a whole talk on DNA. Not the whole talk, but when I was out in Australia, part of the talk was on DNA and what that kind of represents and symbolizes as far as an energetic spectrum or reflection of everything we've experienced in the past, actually all the way back through the history of the universe. But I won't get into that right now, basically. But the evolution of humanity is actually side by side with the evolution of law, which is where a lot of my research has come from lately. So when looking at the evolution of law, you can actually see it come from the animal kingdom into tribal law, and then what some people call natural law. And I don't really get into the titles and the official names of it, because that's very easy for most people to be able to say, oh, no, natural law means this means that means that, because I looked it up on Wikipedia. And the way that I look at it is removing all those titles from it. If we were to look back into tribal law, the way that it was actually done was within a tribe. If there was a dispute between two individuals, it was their duty as individuals of this tribe to settle it amongst themselves, so it wouldn't be a burden to anybody else. But if they could not settle it amongst themselves, then they would bring it to one of the elders of the tribe. Now, that elder would be there to settle that dispute, but the other individuals were then at the mercy of the elder. They both recognize, okay, we can't settle this on our own, so we basically have to put this into the hands of somebody who's detached from it, but somebody like an elder who has a good bearing on I guess you could say justice or fairness or compassion, and you bring that burden to somebody else. That's exactly what we do today with courts. However, everything now is the burden of the court. The courts actually assume more burden than they're even given. They actually go out looking for burden. They send police officers out looking for burden, so they can bring that burden to the court and they can settle it monetarily, and they can keep that cash flow going. But if we were to look at it, and this is also part of Rob's research, is I think it's called the Great Sanhedrin, okay, in the Bible, which is 70 elders of families plus one being Moses, and that's the Great Sanhedrin. But then a lesser Sanhedrin is actually, I believe it's 23 individuals. So 23 individuals make up the lesser Sanhedrin, but then if you were to understand what the majority of that would be, is 12. So 12 individuals make up the majority. That's why we have 12 jurors in our modern common law courts. And a lot of these numbers from the Bible still exist today, but I believe that from the Bible that actually came from tribal law. It actually came through thousands of years, I believe, thousands of years of the evolution of law along with the evolution of humanity. So what we see today as law cracking down so hardcore on the simplest, tiniest little things that really have nothing to do with, I'm a human being and I can do whatever I want as long as I do no harm to anybody, and I don't impose myself in the way of their pursuit or their path towards their own purpose. Because I don't see it as really being, most people say it's like, well, you can't get in between somebody's path to God. I actually say it's the path to purpose, because you can actually, some people believe that they can define what God is, and there are some communities and cultures that actually do believe they can define what God is, and that's how their law is kind of built. But I believe that purpose is something that's given to us from within, and it can only be given from within. So if we respect other people's purpose, then there's no way that you could ever say that that person is doing something wrong and it's my job to stop them. As long as they're not impeding you on your path to your own purpose, or as long as they're not hurting or damaging you, or damaging the earth, or damaging the environment, or damaging things for other individuals, then that is really, truly what that natural law is, just being a human being. You are free to be on this earth and find your purpose, wander this earth, use all the resources, meet all the people you want to find your purpose, because this is a playground of the experience of consciousness. So you should be able to, we should allow everybody to be able to find their own purpose uninhibited by us in any way, shape, or form. But when you have the amount of laws that we have today, I actually believe it's kind of a beautiful thing, because this is something that actually gets into my work. If you were to look back thousands of years into history, you'll see every single civilization has a moment in time where their children go from basically children or adolescence into adulthood through puberty most of the times. But if you were to actually look at what that is, there's an initiation there. And some of those initiation rites were actually quite brutal. But some of them just had to do with a certain thing that the child had to do to prove that he or she could take care of himself and find his own purpose. So,
okay, just quickly, I'd like to just remind everybody that you're listening to freethinkradio.com. This is Lifting the Veil with Cari-Lee, and my guest today is Ben Stewart. Go ahead, Ben.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just finish this up real quick. Basically, if you were to look back, this initiation is something that still exists today. All initiations in the past usually had to do with the individual has to make the choice themselves to become an adult. They have to make the choice themselves to venture out and venture within and also venture without, to find what makes them or what gives them their purpose. So today we have the same thing, but nobody, especially not the legal society, especially not the government, nobody is going to tell you about, I don't even want to say loopholes because they're not loopholes, but almost every single form of law at least respects the freedom of religion and the freedom of that purpose and that natural law. So if you look at it today, it doesn't matter where you live, you still have the ability to do your own due diligence, look into what governs you, like Robert Paget had done, look deeply into what governs you outside of yourself and within yourself, and then choose to be an adult and choose to be independent. And then eventually you can choose to be interdependent. But I believe that what we're going through as a species right now is an initiation into adulthood as a species, because we can either A, stay children and keep destroying this planet, keep dirtying up our room and never cleaning it up, eventually to the point where we can't live in it anymore. Or we can choose, all right, this is where we've come so far, but we can make the decision right now to change those ideas that have driven us into a new evolution for humanity. And I think that's what's happening right now. I actually think that everything that's happening on the planet is right on cue. And I think that's exactly what's happening right now. We're going through this initiation, and we are turning into an adult race. Now, does that mean that all 7 billion people on this planet are going to become adults? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. But that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah, I have to agree with you that some people, I mean, you look around. We went to a parade yesterday, just as an example, and we were able to notice that you can see who is kind of shaken awake from it and who isn't. There are a lot of people that are very comfortable in their apathy, and I'm not looking down on them for that. I mean, everybody's got their own way of getting to where they need to go. But the thing is that there are a lot of people that are just not willing to let go. And I think that, I mean, even we're struggling with it. I do whatever I can. We're living off of, you know, my husband does have a job that he has to go to, and he's doing the taxing, but we're looking for other ways, which is why I'm so interested in the whole Robert Paget story, because of the fact that we would really like to be, and we're in the middle of looking into finding community. That whole idea of common unity where you can be with people. You can't influence others. You can only influence people so far. And then you're just kind of banging your head against a wall. And then you have to realize that you kind of need to move yourself away from what you're, you know, where you're getting nowhere from, and try and get to the energy and with other people instead of trying to constantly force it onto somebody else. Connect it with others. And that seems to be the trick. How do you feel about that idea of, you know, self-sustainable community living and whatnot?
I think it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, obviously I'm big into all different forms of permaculture, aquaculture, some incredible ways of, at least as far as when it comes to growing your own food and being sustainable and taking care of yourself. I think there's many more intelligent ways than agriculture to get along, where there is no such thing as waste. In agriculture, there's so much runoff and so much waste, but in permaculture, there's no such thing as that, because everything that we would consider waste is actually food for something else.
Exactly.
And I've actually done some designs of aquaculture and permaculture using mycelium and introducing certain insects and certain plant species in a certain environment, and it takes care of itself. It becomes the laborer, to where you don't need a farmer. You need to be there at least to upkeep it a little bit, but it's nowhere near what agriculture is. So sustainability in that sense, I believe, is absolutely beautiful. And I think that's also a very good analogy to what that self-sustainability is within us, because there really is no such thing as waste within us. I think that's the one thing that most people look at and they say, okay, these are emotions that I don't want, so I'm going to remove them. I no longer want those emotions. These are experiences that I don't want to have to deal with, so I'm just going to keep myself away from those experiences. These are things, or these are people, and this is a certain type of research. This is a certain idea that I don't want to attach myself to. So we remove ourselves, but all that really is doing is negating reality. So the only way you can negate reality is by putting up a wall and ignoring something. And if you keep putting up a wall, what does that look like? If you keep putting up walls around you to keep other things out, what is that eventually going to look like?
You're shutting everybody out.
It looks like a prison.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself into your own prison. And that is why I believe law is looking more or less like a prison every single day. We here in this supposedly free country of the United States are so all right with and so completely okay with these laws that remove freedoms. Laws are supposed to do basically, in my personal opinion, laws are supposed to do one thing, and that's protect people's freedoms, not remove people's freedoms. And that is something that I see a complete antithesis of here in the United States and pretty much everywhere. But that is not the doing of the government, because as much as people would like to say that, yes, there is this controlling hand, which I do believe, obviously, because I've put it in my work. But even, let's say, the Rothschild dynasty, the most powerful dynasty, I think it was early in the 2000s, maybe even just before the turn of the millennium. The Rothschild dynasty was noted to be having, I think it was over $300 trillion, something ridiculous, like $300 trillion, and I could be complete. It's either trillion or billion. But I know that the Rockefeller dynasty had 10 billion or trillion, whatever it was. But when looking at that, yes, that is a lot of power. But who gives fiat currency its force and effect? It's not the Rothschilds. It's not the central banks. It's nobody but us. We allow to give it all of this energy. Why? Because we choose to play this game. It's like Monopoly. That money, those pieces of paper, only have value in that game. So the more you play that game, the more value is placed on that money. However, all you have to do is realize, oh my God, this is just a game. I can't eat this money. It's not going to help me in any other way other than within this game. So if you want to keep playing that game, by all means, absolutely. I choose not to keep playing that game. And I'm in a long, slow, gradual process that's part of my life for me to actually discover where my energy goes and what I'm giving that energy to. But the thing is, with law, if we look at law, we are the ones that give force and effect to every single law because we're complicit with it. And a lot of people say, well, we stand up, we sign our petitions, we wave our placards, we wave our picket signs, and nothing seems to happen with changing of laws. Well, that's because the game that we're playing is not being run by us. We are allowing for a foreign, an alien game to be placed over top of us, and we just for so long have been choosing to play this game that we don't really say anything about it anymore. We say a little bit here and there when a new legislation is passed that we disagree with. But how about when you get to the root of the problem, being the fact that none of us really want community anymore? If you look into, especially here in the United States, if you look around, most people with tinted windows on their car, with better security systems on their house, which, yes, I understand all of this, but we're blockading ourselves in the house to where we no longer need to talk to our local farmer because we have a grocery store. We no longer need to talk to a clerk at a grocery store because now there are these little machines that we don't have to talk to individuals anymore. We don't have to speak to anybody on the phone anymore because we have a computer. We can send emails, or we can do all our banking and do all of that stuff online. We actually don't even have to talk to individuals anymore. We just have text popping up on the computer screens. So we're removing ourselves from this community to where we're not actually getting out and doing anything anymore. Why go out to the movies when we could just watch it inside? Why go out and do anything when we could just buy those toys and do it here in our own home? And because the computer screen doesn't talk back to me, the TV doesn't talk back to me, I get to tell it exactly what to do. It doesn't tell me what to do. I pay for a certain program and I watch it. It gives me exactly what I want. And if it doesn't, I'll turn it off. And if you think about it, that's the tip of the iceberg of the energy that we're actually giving. And you'll actually hear many people saying, like, I want change. I want these things to change. I want a better, more inhabitable world for us to live in. But do their actions show anything remotely similar to that? And I would venture to say no.
No, because nobody wants to actually be the change that they expect.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's really sad because you have a lot of people that are sitting there saying that we want all of these things to happen, but they don't know how to get there and they don't know how to do it. They expect it to just, I don't know. I think some people expect there to be like some kind of magic spell that just snaps everybody out of it, but it's not going to work that way. And it's discouraging sometimes. But when you're on a path, you have to go it, and there are going to be hard times, and there is no such thing as perfection. And the idea that you can't just give up and walk away and think that there's not going to be any type of change, so I'm just going to go back and the if I can't beat them, join them mentality. You've got to be strong, and it's hard for some people to be strong because we've got so many crutches around us.
Well, yeah, and again, we are the ones who set these crutches up. As much as we would like to believe that this is a game that was placed in front of us and we're being duped into something. We are being duped into something. We are being strung along in this game, but it's us that's doing it. It's our own consciousness that's allowing for this. Because the consciousness is never unconscious. I know we say that there are a lot of people that are unconscious, and we say that there's subconscious, but there's really nothing that is unconscious. There's just varying levels of consciousness. And the consciousness does recognize absolutely every impression that enters the physical organism. It recognizes it. So if there's stress that we're placing on our bodies because of some impossible demand that we don't even realize that we're placing upon ourselves, we do recognize it. Most of the times, and I tell people this sometimes in the talks that I give, in the middle of something that I'm saying, I'll stop and I'll say, okay, everybody, pay attention, bring your attention to what's going on in your body right now. Is anybody tense? Can you relax more than where you are right now? And 90% of the people, almost all the time, realize that they were tense. They had tension in their bodies for no reason whatsoever. They're sitting there in a completely supposedly relaxed state, but there's no relaxation going on in the body. And that's one thing that's an example that I give. A lot of the people that believe, we need to be free, and we need to do it by signing petitions and taking up arms and going and raiding the White House and just pulling these people out of office and completely taking over. I don't see freedom in that. And what I mean is I don't see freedom in individuals like that because they feel they need to do something to change something to feel free, because they don't feel free right now. And that's another reason why I say just give it a try. Look into where your freedom actually exists, because most every single time, just look at people who win the lottery and they think that, oh, all my troubles are over. I won $20 million in the local lottery and all my troubles are over. Statistically, people who win the lottery, I think, I forget what the actual statistic is, but it's an ungodly amount that actually commit suicide after winning the lottery. Because, in my opinion, it's because they recognize, wait a minute, I have all the money in the world and I'm still not happy? How does this compute? I can't comprehend this. I thought money was supposed to grant me my freedom. I thought I would have the ability to do anything I want, and I'm not happy. And it doesn't seem to register with them that, yeah, these are just pieces of paper or numbers in an account. Most of the time, that money doesn't even really exist. It's just numbers in the computer. So how could that ever make you happy? You know, obviously, many people say, oh, well, I could buy a bigger house, a bigger car, this, that, and the other. If you talk to anyone, absolutely anybody, I mean, the richest of the rich down to the poorest of the poor, they all have the same exact problems when you get to the root of the matter. When you get to the heart of the matter, they are all dealing with the same exact things. They have different faces. They have different egos on top of their struggles and on top of their suffering. But their suffering always comes back from the same exact thing, and that is a lack of freedom. And that freedom is misunderstood. That freedom is not going to exist in a certain nation. It's not going to exist because of a certain document. It's not going to exist once we do something, or once we do this, or once we change these people's minds, or once we change legislation here. That's not freedom. And the more we keep fighting that, the more we keep seeing the same problems in the world. And then you'll have the same people over and over and over again saying, look at these fruitcakes, believing that all you have to do is meditate and the world will change. Well, that's not at all what I believe. Again, what I believe is first you have to see the actual root of your own suffering. Then you can do something about it. But I would not let any doctor that has not actually seen my body and has not actually seen or has been trained to work in the physical anatomy, I would not let any of them operate on me. I would not let somebody that doesn't know anything about cars work on my car. So why would I want people that know absolutely nothing about suffering to try and change things in this nation to try and remove suffering from it? That's like sending a child into the operating room with a scalpel and just saying, have at it. Just, imagine what the problem would be and just start cutting stuff out. Well, that's exactly what I think that a lot of individuals, specifically here in the States, and specifically the more rah, let's take up guns, let's do something, let's storm the White House type individuals, what I see a lot of them, they have ideas of what the problem is, and they believe that as soon as they eliminate Dick Cheney, or as soon as they eliminate Barack Obama, or as soon as they eliminate central banking or fiat currency, then everything's going to be great. It's going to be a utopia. But I don't believe that one bit, not one bit, because that is not the root cause of any of our suffering. All of our suffering comes from the human being, and all human beings are driven by consciousness. That is the most scientific way that we can actually look at this. If we keep looking at it in a very intellectual way and calling it scientific and being like, well, this makes sense to this and this makes sense to that, and when you look at the problems, it normally always comes from the Rockefellers. It normally always comes from these individuals. So if I look, all you have to do is remove those individuals, and there's your problem. That takes care of the problem. And to me, that's completely antithetical, because all you're doing is you're delaying the inevitable, because something will always take the place of that older tyrant. And usually that tyrant, that newer tyrant, will do it in a completely new way. I mean, look at Barack Obama. Everybody was so excited, so happy, because he said change. He said the magic word. Everyone wants change, and he said it. So, oh my God, let's let him do it. So he steps into office. Now, what's happening with our budget? What's happening with forgiving debt? What's happening overseas in our foreign relations? Worse things than we've ever seen. You know, George Bush was no prize peach, but look at Barack Obama. Barack Obama, the problem with that is he actually can speak. He can actually he's a good orator. So basically, he looks like he knows what he's doing. And that's all that really matters. I've seen doctors that sound like they know what they're talking about, but they don't know the human physical organism. They know the anatomy. They know the flesh and the tissues and the liquids and the plasmas, and they know those things in the body, but they don't recognize energy. They don't recognize consciousness. They don't recognize emotions, psychology. They don't recognize any of that. And that, to me, is not a doctor. That is not a health taker or healthcare individual.
Provider, yeah.
Provider, right, yeah. And that's, again, back to the heart of the matter of everything that my work is about, is you can keep looking at the world and saying we need to take care of central banking because statistically, scientifically, that's what the problem is. We need to remove these people from office because statistically, scientifically, that's what the problem is. Statistically, scientifically, in our minds, is what children believe to be statistic and scientific. Because children just take whatever they need to build their ideas upon, and they'll start playing with it, and then playing with those ideas. And I'm sorry to say it, but if you look at most independent research out there on the internet, all of it is hyperbole. It's just ideas that come from one small idea, and it just keeps going and going and going, and then, oh my God, this looks like it connects, so we'll connect it. This looks like it might have a correlation to this, so we'll connect it. This looks like it might have something to do with it, so we'll connect it. And here you go. Here's a conspiracy. This is what's wrong with the world. As long as we take care of this, no more problems. And I don't see that at all. I see that what most people call science is actually just random ideas, and it's worse. It's actually worse to promote those ideas of science than to looking into what the true science is, because I believe thousands of years ago we knew what true science was a lot more than we do today, because we knew thousands of years ago that a true scientist is never a scientist until they recognize the observer. And we're just starting to recognize this again today with quantum physics and the power of the observer to change the observed or to change the experiment. But if you look at the first card in the tarot deck, the Magi or the Magician, that is a scientist that recognizes that the energy is being transformed within him alchemically, and that is where the science comes from. So science and magic, or science and emotions, or science and consciousness are one and the same. If you were to remove one, then that is basically watching a third of a movie and thinking that you know the entire story, or reading a chapter out of a book and saying that you know exactly what that book is about. If you were to remove consciousness from science, which almost all modern science does, if you were to remove consciousness, you're not going to see a thing. All you're going to see is the reflections of things. So that's like a bunch of mirrors walking around this earth with reflections of human beings, but no real life in it. That's what science is to me. If you remove the consciousness, you get nothing. Only when you understand consciousness can you then understand science. And from that point, then, yes, the scientific method works. But all this talk about the scientific method and everything should be put through the scientific method. How about the scientific method that has to do with consciousness? Or the scientific method that has to do with how the body transforms light? Because that's science. That's real. And that's actually much more profound than any of the science that any of our machines that we create, these lesser things, all the science that they give us, all the technology, all the readouts from all the technology that we've created, these lesser organisms, that's what we take as science. But what about our observation? What about the organism that we are? That's a type of technology that we have not been able to recreate. So why are we trusting these lesser things and not trusting our own selves? That's what my work is about, really, being able to look into the consciousness and see that you will understand science. You will understand quantum physics. You will understand all mathematics. You'll understand all these things because there will be a relationship to the individual. But without that, which is what we've been seeing over the past several hundred years, or at least since the Industrial Revolution, if you only take a look at what you have scientifically in the world as a reflection of what we are, then you're never going to truly solve the problems that we have at their core. And the problems that we have at their core are human in nature. They're not technological, they're not governmental, they're not political, they're not financial, They're not economic. They're human. And that is, again, the core of all of my work, because I believe that action should be taken. But I am not going to call for action. I am not going to make any call to action whatsoever until people actually recognize that they themselves are important. They themselves have value. Because if we keep looking towards others, like, oh my God, this other person's going to put out another book. I can't wait to read it so I can get some more truth. Or this other guy is going to put out a documentary. I can't wait so I can see more truth. That's not really what it is. Read those books, watch those documentaries, but watch them, read them in a way that you are actually putting yourself into it and realizing that this makes sense to me because my life is a reflection of this. And then bring it home with you. Take it home with you. Take it into your lives. Everything that you read about meditation, everything you read about being a compassionate, loving, respectful individual, try it. Most people say these things and they talk about it over and over and over again and they use those words, but how many people actually try it? When you're in a situation where somebody subtly, very, very slyly gives you an insult or just kind of sneaks in like something very undermining to you, there's a choice that can be made there. You can either say something back that will get back at them, or you can recognize it for what that situation actually is. That person who made that comment, typically, and this is just an example, but let's look at it this way. That person who made that comment is suffering. So you can do one of two things. You can either help that individual see their suffering, or help that individual help them along in their own evolution in their life, or towards their own path, towards their own purpose, or you can create a distraction for them. And distraction is just by trying to reassert your values above and beyond their values and trying to win the conversation or win the argument or win. Because winning is not really what it's about, in a sense. Co-creating, even sports. This is another thing I brought up in Australia. If you were to look at sports, where sports actually came from, nowadays we look at sports as being this, one of the most evil things. It keeps people dumbed down. It also makes people feel that they have to fight to get the scraps, fight one another and able to survive. If you actually look back into the origin of sports, it's about together as a group, working together. This is the reason for most team sports is you're there as a team trying to figure out how to continually overcome and pretty much overcome any challenge whatsoever. And that's why you do it over and over and over again. Any given Sunday, this whole thing about football, that any given Sunday you can win, that's one way to look at it. But really, every given Sunday, you can learn how to overcome a certain obstacle with a team. You can learn how to work with one another to overcome the problems that you've had in the past. And when we look back into sports, it's actually more about co-creating and pushing each other to be better as individuals rather than I want to beat these individuals so they know that I'm better than them. And that's the way it is today. And we look at sports and say that sports is the problem, but it's not sports. Again, it's humans, because it's a human being or many human beings that drives, and it's the ideas of those human beings that drives what sports are today. So if we look at sports, if we look at government, if we look at economy, if we look at Wall Street, if we look at any of these things where there's actually scrounging to get to the top, like I want to outdo this individual in the polls so I could be the next president, or so I could be the next congressman, or I could be the next this, that, and the other. All of those things really should be looked at in a different way. Instead of removing the system, instead of removing everything that we have right now, take a step back and look at what it was actually meant to be. Because there's a lot of these things that I don't see there's much of a problem of. Having somebody to represent you in your hometown, a representative of your state or your hometown, I think that's fine. Because they used to do that thousands of years ago. They were called elders. They would represent their tribe. They would represent their community. I see no problem in that. The problem is the individuals thinking that that individual has to make them a more convenient life, or has to provide for them a better this or a better that. And that's not what it's going to be. Our representatives aren't here to make our lives better. They're honestly not. They're there to represent our concerns to a higher authority, or maybe not an authority, but to the government. But it is the individual. It's the community. It starts at an individual level and then blossoms to a community level, then to a state level, then to a national level. But it has to start at the individual. It doesn't start from the top down. And the thing is everybody complains about these few individuals at the top that controls everything. However, those same individuals that complain about that so much are failing to recognize that it's themselves that are refusing to acknowledge the fact that they first have to recognize where their freedom comes from, where their suffering and where their slavery comes from. And it has to come from an individual level. And if they want to do something about it, then start doing something about it.
Yeah, they have to understand that they're the ones that are in control of what goes on with them. And if more people realize that and didn't take the idea of, well, there's nothing I can do, I'm just one person.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, obviously there is still suffering, and there is always going to be a certain amount of suffering as we evolve and as we grow, because suffering comes from a very deep, arcane portion of the physical organism, or within humanity. So whether we can actually locate the true source of all of our suffering, because obviously if you look back in scriptures, they say it's desire in general. But what prompts us to desire? What prompts us to do that? What initiates the human individual to have desire? Or what prompts the consciousness to have desire? What I see is it's not so much the desire as it is the holding on to that desire, the grasping of that desire. Because I believe that consciousness in and of itself wanted to know itself. It had a desire to know itself. Therefore, it manifested itself into this physical reality that we have. So we wouldn't have this reality if there wasn't that longing, if there wasn't that desire for the consciousness to know of itself. What I believe, though, is that we are going to experience suffering. As I told you, I'm suffering from a pretty bad fever right now.
Yeah.
But the very first thing, as this fever started coming on, I didn't sleep at all last night, but to be able to keep in mind that, again, this too shall pass, and there's something that I will learn from this, and I am learning from this, and that's really what it is okay, I recognize that this is a great fishing trip that I'm out on, but it's not going to last forever. So when it's done, I'm not gonna complain about it. I'm going to go home and I'm going to find what the next adventure is. Or this is a really interesting argument I'm having, and it's very confrontational to me. So instead of trying to veer away from it or shy away from it or somehow just quell it, no, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to see what's actually going on here with this individual and within me, because maybe I'll learn something. But I'm not going to hold on to it. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this, that, and the other. But I'm not going to hold on to any of those things. Maybe in a week from now, I desire to do this or that or the other. But I'm not going to hold on to it because I know that everything changes. Everything shifts, everything evolves, everything changes. And my life so far has been nothing but experiencing different things in different ways. And if I were to try and hold on to one experience, that's what causes my suffering. Because I'm going to feel certain things. I'm going to feel sadness. I'm going to feel depression. I'm going to feel anger, lust, pride, envy, all of those things. But I'm never going to be able to move past them if I don't learn from them first. And I'm never going to be able to move past them if I don't want to move past them. And that's what I see is going on the planet right now, specifically here in the United States. People don't truly want to move past it. It's one thing to say that you want change. It's another to actually want it. And I don't believe most people really want change. They feel within themselves that something is not right. They feel that they may be enslaved. But they don't know what it is. And they don't want to look for it because still, when they sit in front of when they sit in their living room and they sit in front of their TV, they're safe. It's comfortable. There's no tanks on the street. There aren't troops at their front door banging in the door. None of that is happening. So people, as of right now, are not looking at what's actually going on in the world. They're looking at what's actually going on right in front of them on their computer screen and then having an idea of what's going on in the world. But that's not real. That's not real life. They're not looking into anybody's eyes. They're not going out and meeting any individual. They're not really participating in anything, and they're definitely not co-creating anything with anyone else. So that, again, that's another thing that I see when you look out into this world and you see people that are begging and screaming for child abuse to stop. Well, let's take a look at why child abuse started. People are begging and screaming for poverty to be taken care of. But have we found why poverty was a problem in the first place? How it started? How about any type of abuse, domestic abuse, moral abuse, emotional abuse, poverty, famine, wars, bigotry, racism, hatred, all of those things? How did they start? Instead of reverse engineering it and going from what we have now and then trying to work backwards, just go to the root of that weed and clip it at its root, or pull it out by the root. But if you keep just clipping off the top that's sprouting above the soil, then you're never going to stop that weed from growing because you're not getting at its source. But there is a certain type of soil that all of this decay and all of this decadence in society is coming from. And that soil is the minds of human beings. And I guess that's really the best, most simplest way that I could put it, is the soil that all corruption, all decay, all hatred, all poverty, all war, all of those things, they all come from the mind. Every single one of them. The soil of the mind is what breeds those problems.
I couldn't have said that any better. That very well done. Now I have a few people who've asked me a couple questions. So I'm going to just, if you don't mind, ask you a couple questions from the listeners. One had asked what you think of the whole Nibiru situation, Elenin, the comet situation. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you what, that is extremely interesting, and I'm very glad that that person asked. I haven't gotten to research it too incredibly much, but I've seen quite a bit on it. So this comet, and I haven't seen on the news how much they're actually saying it's a comet, or if there's anyone actually saying that it's a dwarf star or a dark star. But I know I've seen some stuff on the internet that's saying it's an actual dwarf star. I don't know. I haven't looked into the research to be able to say what I believe. But as far as it being Nibiru, I couldn't really say. I really couldn't say, because there are, again, I was even speaking with Max Egan when I was out in Australia with that about Elenin, and a lot of the assumptions that we were coming to from it had to do with not really looking at the hardcore evidence and just looking at the fact that somebody called it a dwarf star, and that somebody said that it was going to be entering, I guess September 26th is the date that it's going to be in between the Earth and the Sun, and it's going to, I don't know if it's going to cancel out, but it will actually have more of a gravitational effect over the Earth than the Sun will at that point. And that's something that I found extremely interesting. Now, there's an individual out there that believes that this thing is being piloted. I don't know how true that is. I really don't know what brought him to that assumption that this thing is being piloted. I guess it would be the activity of the way that it's going. But the thing that I found very interesting about it is the major earthquakes that we've been seeing, and a lot of the major natural disasters that we've been seeing over the past, I guess, year or so, have correlated with Elenin. And there's a whole page. I'll try and find the research on this. There's a whole page that actually lines up certain alignments with Elenin to our solar system or to the Earth, and there are specific things that happen on each and every one of those dates. And I find that extremely interesting. So honestly, there's not much that I can really say, because I haven't really gotten into that research. I've been so engulfed in all the research for this next film coming up, but that's something that I definitely am going to be researching a lot more after this film is done. I find it extremely interesting. But as far as the connection with Nibiru, I can't really say, anything yet because I'm not really sure how sold I was on the Nibiru idea to begin with.
Yeah, I take the same stance. I don't know. I just kind of sit back on that one and I watch.
It'll be interesting, though. I mean, the next few months will tell. September 26th will be one of the big dates.
Just around the corner, right?
Yeah.
What are you thinking about? Okay, now, I mean, sure, the mind is what's responsible for so much, right? And the human being. What do you think about chemtrails? What do you think about the fluoride in the water and whatnot? What are your thoughts on that? And I mean, I know I've watched your movies, but I'm just curious as to the way that you take this in your daily life, because, you know, we can all get different types of water that aren't fluoridated and whatnot. But what do you do about the chemtrails in the sky? You don't run around the city with a gas mask with painted flowers all over it. You know, I mean, as much as that might be good for a pick-up, but I mean, what are we doing?
Well, actually, I have seen in some of the major cities, and I don't believe it's from the chemtrails, but I have seen people running around, not with gas masks on, that would be pretty funny, but with medical masks on. I think it's more to do just with other individuals and getting sick from other individuals, but I have seen quite a few individuals walking around cities with medical masks on. So I don't know, maybe some of them are picking up on it. But I'll tell you the truth. As far as fluoride is concerned, I dedicated a large part of Esoteric Agenda to that because of the effects that fluoride has on the pineal gland and how important the pineal gland is to our, how should I say, our perception of reality, and it being basically where DMT comes from, or what interacts with DMT being the interface for our reality, and DMT being something that's in absolutely almost every living organism out there. Fluoridating the body calcifies the pineal gland and atrophies it. And it also, and one thing that you could say that actually specifically does, I know in Esoteric Agenda I talked about how it makes people docile, but some of the research that I've been doing more lately is with the pineal gland, it actually removes a certain layer of our perception of reality with it, and the way we process and transform light, because our eyes are obviously receivers of light. They're instruments that receive light. There's a reason why there's a black hole at the center of our eye, and there's a reason why the opposite end of that magnet, if you will, is the sun. So we receive our light from the sun. It passes through our cornea into the pineal gland, and that is how we transform light. So it's kind of interesting, and I don't have like a complete thesis on this yet, but it's kind of interesting to show that in major cities, there's a psychological thing, that kind of behavior that you can see within cities, why people remove themselves from nature, remove themselves from almost anything natural, and they put themselves into a concrete jungle to basically run around on a hamster wheel to generate this fiat currency that really has no value whatsoever, just so they can spend that fiat currency on more clothes and more things and more food to keep them going within that concrete jungle. And there's removal of a little bit of purpose, I would say, in that. But specifically, now, I'm in West Hanover in Pennsylvania right now, but if you travel 15 minutes closer into Harrisburg, they fluoridate the water there. They don't here, but they do there. And I've even made a call to the water companies, and I've even asked, like, why do you fluoridate water? Just asking, not threatening or anything, just asking. And the individual basically was like, oh, well, it comes down from an authority higher than us. I was like, well, can I speak with that authority? And they're like, okay. So they put me on with, I'm not sure if it was the president of this company or what, and I spoke with this individual for a while, and it just so turned out that he was well aware of a lot of the problems with fluoridating water, and he even told me, he was like, but there's nothing I can do about it. It actually comes from a higher authority than even us. So I have no idea really what to make of that, because I try not to make any claims without actually doing some bit of research. It would be very easy for me to say, well, then it's got to be the government, and then it's got to be Dick Cheney. He's behind every problem out there. But I really have no idea. But it's very interesting to note that we do fluoridate the water, and it has such a detrimental effect on the body. When I think I put this in the esoteric agenda, it would make much more sense to maybe put some vitamins.
Yeah.
Something that's actually good for the organism to be ingested, not something that's just for the teeth. Like, I don't understand why civilization became so enamored with having great teeth, and I don't believe that's actually what the case is. But I say that kind of in jest in esoteric agenda, because what is so important about fluoridating the water to make sure people have better teeth? What seriously, in all logic, is so important about that, to where there are all these studies that show that it's damaging to the physical organism, but it's still so important to have good teeth that, despite all these problems, we're going to keep fluoridating the water.
It's about playing on people's vanities.
Right. And, I mean, and yes, that's definitely a part of it. But to hop into to the chemtrails, again, I haven't done too much research on any of this, because I haven't really found too many individuals. I haven't found research from too many individuals who have come out and actually said, okay, I know what they're spraying because I'm a pilot. I defected, and this is what's going on. But there are some people who have been doing test samples of the air after some of these chemtrails, and I forget what the two elements are in them, but I've heard varying different ideas of what these chemtrails could actually be doing. Obviously, first and foremost, most people I think believe that it's there just to damage their physical organism and dumb us down on a spiritual level. There are other individuals that believe that it's actually another way to pass like a certain medium through the air, to which weather can be controlled via HARP. And I've also heard another individual has told me that some of these chemicals put into the air actually create a three-dimensional holographic LCD screen in the sky, to where something can be projected into the sky, and you could see it in 360 degrees all the way around it. You could see every angle of it, and it could actually be this holographic display in the sky. And some individuals believe that there's going to be a false flag extraterrestrial terror attack sometime in the near future that will bring the UN and all the nations together into this new world order, this one world government, saying that we need to band together to fight against this threat. And then once that happens, it's martial law, and everybody's complicit with it, because, they're the ones with the guns. Let them take care of this. And then all of a sudden, that's the shift, that's the change. I'm not 100% sold on that, really. But as far as the chemtrails, I've heard several different things. My father's a pilot, and I've had this talk with him, and he's actually told me that any plane at a certain altitude in a certain strata of our atmosphere will create these things called contrails, is what they call them, and it's just agitating certain chemicals in the air to create these things that look like chemicals being sprayed into the air. And him being a pilot for 30 years, that's one thing that before, he had never even heard of chemtrails until I brought it up to him, and I pointed it out to him the one day, and I was like, Dad, what do you think that is? He was like, those are contrails. I was like, okay, what is that? And he said, oh, well, that's when at a certain level, they teach pilots at a certain level of the atmosphere, if you send a plane through the air, even the winds can agitate those particles in certain parts of the air, and it'll turn into this cloud. And he even said, like, you notice, he even pointed one out. He was like, you notice how it breaks up. There are some parts that it's not a straight line. Sometimes it breaks up to where there's a straight line and then it stops for a bit and then it's a straight line again. That's because in that portion, those ionic molecules were not present in the air there. So I'll tell you the truth, I'm not I'm not 100% on any of them because I know there's some really good solid research and evidence out there, but I haven't done enough research to really say anything about chemtrails specifically.
Okay.
But if I get the nature of what you were asking, yes, we as individuals also we plant our own demise in front of us in many ways, and I think that as far as fluoridating our own water and polluting our own air, polluting our water in many different ways other than just fluoridating it, but also stripping all the minerals out of all the foods we eat, destroying the topsoil, completely destroying the earth. I believe that this definitely has to do with a very deep ingrained psychological defect, and it's the self-destruct mechanism within all organisms. Now, if you see a tree, once a tree has died, it will begin certain agents of chaos, as I call them, break it down. Fungus, parasites, bacteria, whatever. It breaks down that organism so it can go back into the earth and build it back up again when that organism, being a tree or a plant or a human being, has fulfilled whatever its purpose is, and it can no longer go on, and it will grow back out of the earth with a new intention, with a new purpose, with a new drive. And I believe that one thing that we do, and we have been doing for a while, is destroying ourselves deliberately. But we do this on a very occult level. We destroy ourselves on a very occult level, and we individually, because there's 7 billion people on this planet, not all 7 billion people intellectually agree to fluoridating the water. Not all 7 billion people agree to the chemtrails or the way that we pollute our earth. That's why I believe that there are forces that are actually attaching itself to this earth that are far greater than we give it credit for. And I've actually, in my meditations, and I've actually had this backed up with several other individuals, but there is an obsessor, as they call it, a psychic parasite over this earth, and I believe it's a feminine parasite, and it is harvesting energy out of this earth, out of this planet. And that's something that I've been coming back to for a while, that there's actually this force, whether it be extraterrestrial, alien, or not, a force that has attached itself to us. And I've actually looked back into some of the ancient Native American cultures, seeing this, what they call this great web around the sky. And other individuals have other ideas of it just being, Michael Tsarian believes it's a force field that quarantined us on this earth. But I actually, what I sense from it, and I can't say this with any certitude whatsoever, but what I sense from it is it's an actual obsessor. It's a feminine entity that is actually harvesting energy, almost raping the planet of energy. And it's something that every organism on this earth is being affected by. But because we have lost a certain connection, a certain natural connection with our planet, we are the front runners of this demise, and we have the ability to, because we have the ability through our imagination to justify any action. Whereas plants and animals, they can't justify destroying their own species for an egotistical reason, because there is no ego. But we have the ability to imagine and justify things. So if we want to go out and pollute our body and drink until our liver hates us, we can justify that, because we could say, oh, well, it's good to let loose every now and then. Or if BP spills a couple billion gallons of oil into the Gulf, they can justify it by saying, yes, but we've provided the world with thousands and thousands and thousands of, millions and millions and millions and millions of gallons of gas that keeps our world going. And that's, again, just another justification. And these justifications run extremely deep, but I believe these justifications are actually driven by, and our egos are predominantly driven by this obsessor that has attached itself to this planet, all around the planet, all throughout the entire atmosphere. And that's one thing that I've been kind of coming back to lately, and I've actually had quite a few people, when I've been traveling, quite a few people that have in their own way, somewhat back this up with their research. So that's something that might go into the next documentary that, not this next one coming up on GRIP, but the following documentary that I do.
Excellent. Now, I would love to sit and talk to you for hours more, But unfortunately, we're coming to the end of 2 hours. And I would just like to thank you so much for coming on to the show. You've been a fantastic guest, and I really hope to have you on again, because I could have just let you go. There's so much that you can cover, and so many of us have been working on ourselves, and it's nice to hear it reverberated from you. You've put some great work out there. I have to say, I wish I would have watched Esoteric Agenda long before I started doing all the research, because, I mean, even though I'm glad that I did all the legwork, you gave it all, more or less, that I had already figured out, and could have saved me quite a few months.
I appreciate it very much. I'm glad I was coherent today, with the fever and everything.
Yeah, and I really hope you start to feel better soon. You sound fantastic. I would like to let everybody know that Ben is also the lead singer of Hero-Sonic. My husband and I purchased a CD, I think a couple weeks ago. It came in, and I love the whole thing. If you want to plug the band at all, by all means, please do.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the band Hero-Sonic, which is Hierosonic, all one word, that stands for Sacred Sound or Sacred Vibration, which kind of actually is close to Kinetica. But if you want to check it out online, it's hierosonic.org, and then we also have reverbnation.com/Hierosonic. Also, we're on Facebook. You can look us up on there, and you can contact us at any time. We're doing actually a lot of community events coming up soon. We actually have a live DVD shoot coming up this Friday that's going to be involved with the Hangman Project. I haven't made an official release on it yet, but what we're doing as a band is we're actually contributing to the Hangman Project with our art, in a way of being able to get people out into their community. So as we tour, it's going to be linked with, or at least allowing individuals from the Hangman group to come out. So definitely, I mean, check it out, hierosonic.org, and we're also on Facebook. Get a hold of us. We contact everybody back that wants to email us.
Yeah, you are fantastic with that. I've talked to a few people who said they got back to us like right away, and I was like, well, yeah, because they're good people. You can just, I get that vibe, and there's no game with you or with the other members of the band. You're just solid, and that's what I get from it. That's from my heart space. So thank you very much for all the work that you do. Thank you so much for coming on the show. All of our listeners, thank you. We've had a great response from listeners. Everybody's saying, thank Ben for me, big hearts and all that jazz. So
thank all of you.
Everybody at the station, everybody that's been listening, and we're very, very glad that you came on the show, and hopefully we'll get to have you on again.
Oh, absolutely. It'll happen again. And,
all right, wonderful.
Yeah, and I am Ben Stewart, and you're listening to freethinkradio.com.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody. It, again, is the 20th of June, 2011. You've been listening to freethinkradio.com. This has been Cari-Lee with Lifting the Veil. Have a great day.